Cucumbers are one of the most prolific vegetables you can grow, but sometimes problems pop up that leave you wondering what went wrong. That's why I've gathered these time-tested cucumber tricks, the kind your grandparents relied on before fancy fertilizers and plastic gadgets took over. These old-school methods helped them grow abundant harvests season after season, and they still work beautifully today. Let's uncover 20 vintage cucumber growing tricks that still work today. Companion planting magic. Long before chemical pesticides, your grandparents knew certain plants helped cucumbers thrive when grown together. This wasn't just folklore, it was practical science passed down through generations. Marigolds planted nearby release compounds that repel nematodes and other soil pests that attack cucumber roots. Nasturtiums act as trap crops, drawing harmful insects away from your precious cucumber vines. But the real superstar companion is dill. Its tiny yellow flowers attract beneficial insects like ladybugs, hoverflies, and parasitic wasps, the natural enemies of aphids and cucumber beetles. Some gardeners even swear cucumbers grown near dill taste better. Basil is another excellent neighbor, as its strong scent confuses and repels thrips, aphids, and whiteflies. As a bonus, basil also repels mosquitoes, making your garden more pleasant while you work. These simple plant pairings cost nothing but can save your entire cucumber crop from devastation. Rich soil preparation. Cucumbers put on lots of vigorous growth, so to support that, they need rich and fertile soil. Your grandparents didn't have access to commercial fertilizers, so they relied on well-rotted manure and compost to create the perfect growing environment. Before planting, they would work plenty of organic matter into the soil, creating a nutrient-rich foundation for their cucumber plants. For an extra boost, they often added natural amendments, like crushed eggshells for calcium or wood ash for potassium. Chicken manure was particularly prized for its high nitrogen content, perfect for the leafy growth cucumbers need to produce abundantly. The rich, dark soil they created not only fed their plants but also retained moisture and supported beneficial soil life. Today, we can follow this same approach by preparing our cucumber beds with compost, aged manure, and organic matter. This foundation of rich soil will fuel your cucumber plants through their entire growing season, resulting in stronger plants and more abundant harvests than any quick-fix chemical fertilizer could provide. Perfect timing techniques. Cucumbers grow astonishingly quickly and can go from sowing to first picking within 2 months, so there's no rush to plant them too early. Your grandparents knew that planting at the right time was more important than getting an early start. They waited until soil temperatures were consistently above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 15 degrees Celsius, before planting, as cucumbers are warm season crops that hate cold feet. Many relied on natural indicators rather than calendars. When the elderberry began to bloom or oak leaves reached the size of a squirrel's ear, they knew it was safe to plant cucumbers. These biological events are tied to accumulated temperature patterns, making them surprisingly reliable guides. Another timing trick was succession planting, starting new cucumber plants every 2 to 3 weeks throughout the growing season. This ensured a continuous harvest rather than a brief glut followed by nothing. As older plants began to decline, younger ones were just hitting their stride. This staggered approach meant fresh cucumbers from early summer until frost and provided insurance against disease or pest problems. Milk spray solution. Before commercial fungicides were widely available, gardeners tried using diluted milk as a preventive spray for powdery mildew, a common cucumber ailment. The practice was simple. Mix 1 part milk with about 9 to 10 parts water and apply it to the leaves with a hand sprayer. The science behind this old remedy is fascinating. The proteins in milk form a thin, protective layer on leaf surfaces, making it harder for fungal spores to take hold. When exposed to sunlight, these proteins create an antiseptic effect that inhibits fungal growth. Modern studies have confirmed what Grandma already knew. Milk spray can be as effective as commercial fungicides for preventing powdery mildew. For best results, apply your milk solution early in the morning on a sunny day, allowing leaves to dry completely before nightfall. Repeat weekly or after rain. This simple, non-toxic treatment costs pennies compared to store-bought fungicides and uses something you already have in your refrigerator. It's a perfect example of how sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. Trellising methods. Cucumbers naturally want to climb, and keeping them off the ground prevents disease, improves air circulation, and makes harvesting easier. Before metal cages and plastic trellises dominated garden centers, people created ingenious supports using materials they had on hand. The simplest method was using sturdy string secured at the top to a horizontal wire. You could also use trellises or A-frame style supports, but many experienced gardeners prefer string for its simplicity. When planting, the strings can either be loosely tied to the base of the stem, or better yet, looped beneath the root ball as it's planted. As the vines grow, they're gently woven into the string for support. This vertical growing approach means cleaner fruits, fewer pest problems, and more cucumbers in less space. Plus, there's something deeply satisfying about watching your cucumber vines climb skyward on a support you created yourself. Your grandparents knew that vertical growing wasn't just practical. It was the secret to getting the most from every square foot of garden space. Seed soaking secret. Before fancy seed treatments existed, your grandparents had a simple trick to jumpstart germination. They soaked cucumber seeds overnight in lukewarm water. This simple step softened the seed coat and began the germination process, giving seeds a head start once planted. After soaking, they drain and rinse the seeds to remove any inhibitors or toxins on the seed coat. The seeds would then be planted immediately while still damp. This priming process could shave days off the germination time, especially in cooler soil conditions. For an extra boost, some gardeners added a drop of liquid seaweed or compost tea to the soaking water, providing gentle nutrients that would be absorbed through the seed coat. This traditional technique costs nothing but can significantly improve germination rates and early growth vigor. It's a perfect example of how sometimes the simplest methods are the most effective. Herbal Tea Sprays. Long before natural pest control became a niche market, gardeners were already making their own. A common method involved soaking strong-smelling plants like stinging nettle, garlic, or hot peppers in water for several days. Once the liquid turned dark and pungent, it was strained and poured into a hand sprayer. This herbal tea was then misted onto cucumber leaves to deter soft-bodied insects such as aphids and whiteflies. The strong odor made the environment less appealing to pests, and because the solution was plant-based, it didn't introduce anything harmful to the garden ecosystem. The effectiveness varied depending on the severity of the infestation and how regularly the spray was applied, but it gave gardeners an alternative to harsher treatments. It also made use of plants that were often growing wild nearby. Today, you can make these same sprays using weeds from your yard or herb garden trimmings, turning potential waste into valuable pest protection for your cucumber plants. Deep planting technique. Here's a secret that experienced gardeners have passed down for generations. Cucumbers benefit from being planted much deeper than most seedlings. Your grandparents knew this not from reading charts, but from working the soil year after year. They regularly dug holes 6 to 10 inches deep, removed the lower leaves, and buried the stem up to just below the top leaf cluster. This practice gives plants a serious head start. Cucumber stems are covered with tiny hair-like structures that can grow into roots when buried. By planting deep, you allow the cucumber to develop a much larger root system, which helps it absorb water better during dry spells and improves overall stability in strong winds. Plants with extensive root systems also access more nutrients, resulting in stronger vines and more abundant harvests. Next time you plant cucumbers, try this deep planting method. Your plants will thank you with weeks of extra production and resilience during summer heat waves. Proper spacing strategy. While modern gardening often emphasizes maximizing space, your grandparents knew that proper spacing was crucial for cucumber success. They typically planted cucumbers between 12 to 18 inches apart, 30 to 45 centimeters, which might seem generous, but this spacing allowed for proper air circulation, critical for preventing fungal diseases. For vining varieties, this spacing made sense when combined with vertical growing methods. The plants had room to breathe at the base while the vines climbed upward, making efficient use of garden space. For bush varieties grown in containers, they were careful not to overcrowd, knowing that stressed plants produce bitter fruit. This thoughtful spacing also made maintenance and harvesting easier. There was room to move between plants without damaging vines, and fruits were more visible and accessible. In today's gardens, we often try to squeeze too many plants into limited space, but following this traditional spacing wisdom will result in healthier plants and ultimately more cucumbers per plant. Consistent watering wisdom. Cucumbers are 96% water, and consistent moisture is perhaps the single most important factor in growing sweet, crisp fruits. Your grandparents checked soil moisture regularly, pushing a finger down about an inch into the soil. If it felt dry, they watered deeply and thoroughly. They knew that inconsistent watering leads to bitter cucumbers and poor production. Rather than frequent shallow sprinkles, they practiced deep, thorough watering that encouraged roots to grow downward. Many used simple techniques like basin irrigation, creating a shallow depression around plants to hold water and allow it to soak in slowly. To retain moisture, they applied mulch around plants once they were established. Materials like straw, dried grass clippings, or shredded leaves kept the soil cool and prevented evaporation. This mulch layer also suppressed weeds and kept soil from splashing onto leaves during rain, reducing disease problems. This simple approach to watering, check often, water deeply, and mulch to retain moisture, remains the foundation of successful cucumber growing. Morning harvesting secret. Your grandparents knew that when you harvest cucumbers is almost as important as how you grow them. They picked their cucumbers in the early morning while the fruits were still firm and cool from the night. This timing resulted in crisper, juicier cucumbers with better flavor and longer storage life. The best way to harvest was to cut them from the vine with a bit of stalk still attached, rather than yanking them off, which could damage the plant. They used sharp scissors or pruners to make clean cuts, reducing the risk of disease entering through wounded stems. They also knew to check plants daily and pick promptly. If you let cucumbers grow too big or miss one until it becomes yellow, it will start forming seeds, and the plant will think it's done its job and begin to shut down. Being meticulous about harvesting every cucumber at its peak size encouraged plants to keep producing. With cucumbers, it really is a case of the more you pick, the more you get. Pruning for productivity. Pruning cucumbers isn't complicated and is a lot like managing tomato vines. Your grandparents knew that strategic pruning improved air circulation, reduced disease, and concentrated the plant's energy into producing better fruits rather than excessive foliage. The leaves, fruits, tendrils, and any side shoots all form from the same intersections along the main stem. For closely spaced plants, they would remove every side shoot or sucker that developed. For plants with more room, they might let the lowest side shoot grow, tying it to its own support, essentially creating a double-headed vine. They also removed the lowest leaves as they became tired and tattered, as well as any overcrowded foliage higher up. This kept leaves away from the soil, reducing disease risk. Once vines reached the top of their supports, they would pinch off the growing point or let the stem flop back down and develop side shoots for more fruits. These simple pruning practices take just minutes but can significantly increase your harvest while reducing disease problems. Natural pest management. Cucumber beetles, aphids, and squash bugs were just as problematic for your grandparents as they are for us today, but they developed ingenious ways to manage these pests without chemicals. One effective method was to place yellow sticky traps near cucumber plants. The bright color attracted cucumber beetles, which then became stuck to the adhesive surface. For aphids, they encouraged beneficial insects by planting flowers like sweet alyssum and cosmos nearby. These flowers attracted ladybugs, lacewings, and hoverflies, all voracious consumers of aphids. They also used companion plants like garlic and chives, whose strong scent confused and repelled many cucumber pests. Another traditional technique was to cover young plants with lightweight fabric row covers until they began to flower. This physical barrier kept pests away during the vulnerable early growth stage, but was removed when flowering began to allow pollinators access. These natural pest management strategies required observation and patience, but resulted in healthy plants without introducing harmful chemicals into the garden. Bean teepee companions. One of the cleverest companion planting techniques your grandparents used was the bean teepee support system. They would create a teepee structure using tall poles or bamboo, then plant pole beans and cucumbers together at the base. As both plants grew, they would climb the structure, creating a living green tower. This method offered multiple benefits. The beans, being nitrogen fixers, enriched the soil for the nutrient-hungry cucumbers. The dense foliage created a natural shade for the soil, keeping roots cool and reducing water evaporation. The beans also provided some protection from strong winds for the more delicate cucumber vines. Children especially loved these living teepees, which created natural playhouses by midsummer. The structure was practical, beautiful, and productive, providing both beans and cucumbers from the same footprint. This space-saving technique remains perfect for small gardens today, combining the benefits of companion planting with vertical growing in one elegant solution. Cold frame, head start. Before greenhouses became common, gardeners had a simpler solution for extending the growing season: cold frames. These were like miniature, low-to-the-ground greenhouses made of wood and old window panes. They worked by trapping heat from the sun, creating a warm microclimate that let gardeners start cucumber seedlings earlier in the spring. Many families repurposed old storm windows or glass doors, setting them at an angle over a wooden box to maximize sun exposure. A well-built cold frame could turn a chilly spring morning into a cozy 70-degree Fahrenheit paradise for young cucumber seedlings. This gave plants a head start of several weeks, resulting in earlier harvests. Cold frames also provided a protected environment for hardening off seedlings before transplanting them into the garden. The covers could be propped open on warm days and closed at night, gradually acclimating plants to outdoor conditions. This simple structure, often built from salvaged materials, extended the cucumber season at both ends, earlier in spring and later into fall. Bitterness prevention. Occasionally, cucumbers develop a bitter taste from cucurbitaceae, a compound plants produce when stressed. Your grandparents knew this bitterness concentrates at the stem end and just under the skin. To prevent it, they focused on consistent care, regular watering, adequate nutrients, and protection from extreme temperatures. They also selected naturally less bitter varieties and saved seeds from the sweetest cucumbers. When bitterness occurred, they had simple solutions: cutting off the stem end, peeling the fruit, or slicing and salting cucumbers before rinsing to draw out bitter compounds. Today, you can select burpless varieties bred for lower cucurbitacin levels and maintain consistent soil moisture. For all female varieties, they removed any male flowers that appeared, as these could lead to pollination that produced bitter fruit. Remember, bitterness is your cucumber's way of signaling stress, usually from water fluctuations or temperature extremes. Pollination enhancement. Before hybrid varieties with mostly female flowers became common, gardeners sometimes helped nature along by hand-pollinating their cucumber plants. This was especially important during periods of rainy weather when bees were less active or in gardens with few pollinators. The technique was straightforward: identify male flowers, those with a straight stem behind the bloom, and female flowers, those with a tiny cucumber shape behind the bloom. Then, using a small paintbrush or even just a fingertip, transfer pollen from the male flower to the stigma in the center of the female flower. For all female gynoecious varieties, your grandparents knew to remove any occasional male flowers that appeared, as these could lead to pollination that produced bitter fruit. They also planted flowering herbs and annuals nearby to attract more pollinators to the garden. These simple interventions could dramatically increase fruit set, turning potential crop failure into abundance. Today, even with modern varieties, these pollination techniques remain valuable skills during unfavorable weather or for indoor-grown cucumbers. Succession planting strategy. As cucumber plants age, they can start to lose their vigor. In cooler climates, one sowing might be enough for the season, but your grandparents knew that in warmer regions with longer growing seasons, plants would eventually run out of steam before the first frost. Their solution was succession planting, starting new cucumber seeds every 3 to 4 weeks throughout the growing season. This ensured that as older plants began to decline in production, younger ones were just hitting their stride. The result was a continuous harvest from early summer until frost. This staggered approach also provided insurance against disease or pest problems. If one planting failed, others would still produce. To implement this strategy in your garden, simply save some seeds from your initial planting and start new seedlings every few weeks. Each new set of plants needs the same care as the first: deep planting, proper support, and regular watering. This old-fashioned approach takes minimal extra effort but dramatically extends your harvest season. Pickling preservation. Your grandparents didn't let a single cucumber go to waste. When the vines were producing more than they could eat fresh, they turned to pickling, a preservation method that's been used for centuries. They knew that different cucumber varieties served different purposes: smaller, firmer pickling types for preserving, and longer slicing types for fresh eating. The simplest method was refrigerator pickles, sliced cucumbers in a brine of vinegar, water, salt, and spices, stored in the refrigerator for quick consumption. For longer storage, they used water bath canning, carefully following tested recipes to ensure food safety. Dill pickles, bread and butter pickles, and sweet gherkins were common variations, each with its own blend of spices and techniques. This preservation method extended the cucumber harvest long into winter, providing vitamin-rich vegetables when the garden was dormant. Today, these same pickling techniques allow you to enjoy your garden's bounty year-round, connecting you to the self-sufficient traditions of previous generations while reducing food waste and saving money. Cloth ties method. As cucumber vines grow and start setting fruit, they need support to prevent stems from bending or breaking under the weight. Before plastic clips and metal fasteners were widely available, gardeners turned to whatever soft material they had on hand. Old shirts, worn-out pillowcases, or cotton sheets were cut into strips and used as cucumber ties. These cloth ties were gentle on the stems, which is important because cucumbers can bruise or snap if tied too tightly. The fabric was wrapped loosely around the main stem and secured to a stake, trellis, or other support. The softness of the fabric prevented rubbing and scarring during windy days, and the slight give in the material allowed for growth without constriction. Even now, many experienced gardeners still prefer cloth ties over commercial options. They're biodegradable, free, and often work better than plastic alternatives. Next time you're about to discard an old t-shirt, consider cutting it into strips for your cucumber supports. Your plants will thank you with a bountiful harvest. These vintage cucumber growing tricks have stood the test of time because they work. By using these methods, you're not just growing better cucumbers, you're connecting with generations of practical wisdom. Which of these tricks will you be trying next? Let us know in the comments. Have a great day.